Hello, good morning, and welcome to Kunsang Payo Choling, and a teaching by Jetsunma, Ahkon, Lhamo. We're kind of back to the old times, so this is where it's going to be landing in the future. It's 11 a.m., and we welcome you, or at least for the foreseeable future. In any case, we're happy to show you today a teaching from 1989, and the title is The Delusion of Dependent Origination. So hope you enjoy it, and we begin now.
In the Buddhist teaching, there is a mantra which is called the mantra of interdependent origination, which may be considered a condensed version of much of what the Buddha taught. That mantra goes like this: Om ye dharma hetu prabhava hetu taikin tatagatu hayawada taikin zayunido da ewambadi mahashramanra soha. And the exact meaning of that is this: of all things which proceed from a cause, the Tathagata has explained the cause, and he has explained their cessation also. This is the doctrine of the great ascetic, Soha. How are we to understand this condensed teaching? How are we to understand what it properly means? I don't know that I'm qualified to actually speak to you in such a way as to represent all of the Buddha's teachings. I think that one must actually achieve supreme realization, the same as the Buddha achieved, in order to perfectly understand the Buddha's teaching. And so I make no claim for that. But I would like to share with you some of the thoughts that I have had on this subject and offer to you what little I know about it. The Buddha taught something which was very precious at a time where there was no such teaching taught in that particular way. The Buddha studied with, as you know, many yogis, many teachers, many gurus, before he actually left that particular episode of his life and went to sit under the famous tree and achieve realization. He actually had lived an ordinary life, a life as royalty, and as you know, left that life because he realized that in the world there was old age, sickness, and death, and he couldn't bear it. He had in fact lived many lives as a bodhisattva, as an awakening being, and his mind was refined and gentled to the point where he could not do what many beings in his time did. He could not accept the status quo, he could not accept the suffering of the world, and just leave it at that. He wished to accomplish the cessation of suffering. He wanted to find if there wasn't some way to end the suffering of sentient beings. And that was really the nature of his quest. That was what started him, in a sense, to bring about the end of suffering. So he left and he went to many different teachers, many different gurus, both great and famous and obscure and hidden. And with each one of them he studied for some time and actually remarkably quickly accomplished what it was that they had taught him. And there are stories about the different exchanges that he had with each of the teachers. When he would study with a teacher and he would accomplish what that teacher had to offer, in the sense that he would have the proper experience, the proper signs, the accomplishment was there. And yet, even in the midst of that accomplishment, which I assume was very wonderful, very elevated, very remarkable, very blissful, he said to himself, but it hasn't changed anything. There must be something else. And so he would go back to the teacher and say, what else do you have for me? What else is there? And the teacher would say, that's all there is, or that's all I have, whatever. And the Buddha then would go and seek out another teacher. This actually happened several times, even to the ultimate experience that we would think a person could have. Where in one situation he went to a guru and studied with that guru for some time and practiced and accomplished until he had the experience that perhaps we would call, in our terminology now, cosmic consciousness. The experience of the oneness of all life. An experience that is something like realizing oneself to be the same as all that is, and all that is to be the same as oneself. And that experience is a supremely blissful experience. Supremely blissful. One enters in a state of something that we would have to call bliss or ecstasy. An overwhelming ecstasy. It's not like happy in the way that we understand it. Or it isn't even like blissful in the sense that we would understand blissful. Blissful to us would be much less than this experience. This experience would be overwhelming and could be maintained in a very continuous way. And yet the Buddha walked away from that experience, which frankly I don't know if many of us would have the self-control to do. Many of us think, well, bliss is good, I think we'll stay there. Feels okay to me, sounds good, we'll do this one. And he walked away from that experience and asked his teacher, what else is there? Sentient beings are still suffering. And I know in my heart that there is something else. There is something else. And so his guru said to him, no, there's nothing else. That is it. That is the ultimate experience that a human being can have. And the Buddha said to the guru, but sentient beings are still suffering. I haven't solved my quest. I haven't accomplished what I set out to do. And the guru said, so it is, and so it must always be. And so the Buddha made offerings to the guru and then left. And was very grateful for what the Buddha taught, for what the guru taught, and went on about his way. And so he continued and had many experiences and finally ended up under the famous tree. And in that tree he remained in meditative equipoise for some time, until at some point he achieved, after many tests and many experiences, due to the ripening of all of his meritorious karma, and due to the persistence of his meditation, and also due to his pure intention, pure compassionate intention, he experienced supreme realization and knew in the deepest part of him that that was superior and that that was it. And he knew that in that state of supreme realization, all sentient beings could experience, finally, the cessation of suffering in all forms, including old age, sickness, and death, which are the sufferings of the human realm. He knew that in that state, all dharmas, all activities cease. They no longer have the cause and effect format or nourishment from which to arise. In that state, one achieved something which is beyond cause and effect. One achieved something which is beyond the externalized and separated view that sentient beings have. One experiences what is beyond stillness and action. One experiences what is beyond form and formless. One experiences what is beyond the dualistic experience that sentient beings do have. And in that state, therefore, there are not the building blocks by which one experiences suffering. Because according to the Buddha's teaching, all suffering arises from a cause. There is no suffering that does not arise from a cause. And that is the basic meaning of this mantra. This mantra teaches us that the Buddha spoke of both the relative and the absolute view. That the Buddha had the knowledge, the omniscience of the relative view, understood relativity completely, in that of all dharmas, in this case of all activities, that is the meaning of dharmas in this case, of all activities that arise from the cause, and in the view of relativity, that is to say, the view that we abide in, the view of the sentient being, all things arise from a cause, and that cause is traceable. What the Buddha offered at that time was teaching about the cause. Of all the things that arise from the cause, of all the things that occur in relative view, the Buddha offered a teaching about what the causes are. He offered a teaching as well about the antidote to those causes. And he taught, when that teaching actually did not exist at that time, of the cessation of all causes, the cessation of suffering. He described a doctrine of the cessation of cause and effect relationships. And that was the state of supreme enlightenment that he achieved. And that is the teaching that he offers today. How are we to understand the meaning of this mantra and what it actually means to us and in our lives? According to the Buddha's teachings, sentient beings wander endlessly in cyclic existence, in a state of basic delusion. And that delusion is not the psychological thing that we think it is. We think of that delusion in a very simplistic way and a very superficial way. That isn't what the Buddha was teaching. We think that, let's say in my marriage or in my relationship, I am deluded that perhaps my partner is not what he or she seems to be. We have this kind of very superficial insight or feeling of what delusion actually means. And then we think that perhaps, yes, I can understand the Buddha's teaching, yes, I'm deluded, that lots of times I don't really know how things are going to turn out, and I don't know how they got this way. And we think of it in that sense. We think that it means something that simple. If we think of it that way, we actually lose the content, we lose the depth, we lose what that true meaning is. In fact, the meaning is much more profound than that. The Buddha actually teaches us that since time out of mind, since a time before anything that we can trace, we have conceived of self-nature and have come to believe strongly in the reality or truth of self-nature, in fact, in the doctrine of self-nature as being inherently real. We presuppose self. And this is not something that we do freshly or newly in each incarnation. The baby doesn't develop the idea of self on cue at the age of 6 weeks old or 3 years old or whatever the popular psychological theory is. But actually what you see when you see a baby always come to the conclusion of self-nature being inherently real is you actually see the manifestation or the externalization of the continuum of a mind stream that stretches out since time out of mind. You actually are seeing the externalization or the manifestation of that individual's karma. And we all have the karma, the habit, the habitual tendency actually, of conceiving of self-nature as being inherently real. This basic conception, this basic primal idea, the Buddha teaches us, is actually a delusion. And yet from that delusion, every experience that we have, every single one, arises. From the supposition or idea of self-nature being inherently real, consciousness arises. Consciousness actually is completely in accordance and actually is, according to the Buddha's teaching, a result of the idea that self-nature is inherently real. Not only that, but all of the five senses, any sense that we have, even intuitive sense, any perceptual sense, subtle or gross, in truth, is actually an extension of the ego, is an extension of that belief in self-nature as being inherently real. What experience have you had that is not governed by your senses? What experience that you have you had that is separate from consciousness? None. Until we reach supreme enlightenment, even if we are first-class meditators, until we reach the state that is beyond subtle and gross, both, beyond form and formless, beyond movement and stillness, beyond emptiness and fullness, until we reach that state of supreme realization, there is no experience we have ever had that is separate from consciousness. And you can name high kinds of consciousness, and you can name gross kinds of consciousness. Any kind of consciousness, at its root, holds the idea of self-nature as being inherently real. Even if one holds the idea that self-nature is temporarily real, as some faiths do, thinking that self-nature is somehow temporarily real, and then when we achieve realization, we blend then with Godhead, or blend with some divine realization. Even that idea is born of consciousness. However, the pure experience that one has when one actually attains supreme realization is a different kind of experience altogether, and does not presuppose self-nature as being inherently real. So, the Buddha teaches us then that we have been wandering with this conglomeration of experience, that we are constantly, if you think about it, if you think that every single experience that we have had, every single one, is based on the perception of the five senses, or is based on consciousness, it has to be, or is, and then therefore is at its root holding or foundationally assuming self-nature to be inherently real. Then if you think about the implications of that, you realize that since time out of mind, we have been basically bouncing around, reacting to and exaggerating one deluded perception after another. That the delusion that we are involved with is much deeper than the psychological delusion that we can accept we may have. It is a foundational and very basic delusion. According to the Buddha's teaching, once that basic delusion arises, from that point, all of our activity is an exaggeration of that basic delusion. Because when one assumes self, one always and has to, because it is consistent with the assumption of self, one always, therefore, externalizes phenomena. And phenomena appears to be external. The habitual tendency, a strong, compulsive, habitual tendency then arises and continues in such a way that one cannot perceive other than dualistic perception. One cannot perceive other than relativity. One cannot perceive other than self and other. Everything. This falls with everything, you see. This drink that I have here is cool water. How do I perceive it to be wet? I perceive it as relative to self. I'm dry, it's wet. Wet to a fish isn't the same as wet to a human being. How do I perceive this as being cold? I perceive this as being cold relative to self. Cold to a lizard isn't the same as cold to a human being. Everything, all perceptions that we have are experienced in relativity. And then the next thing that we do after that point, and again, it's a knee-jerk reaction. It's automatic and becomes then a compulsive, habitual tendency, is that one reacts. One's life is filled, you see, with reactions. One either likes hot or cold or doesn't. One either likes the color or doesn't. Test yourself. You don't have to take my word for it. In fact, these really aren't my teachings. These are the Buddha's teachings. Try it yourself. Walk into a room and ask someone else to meet you in that room, an empty room, and watch your mind. Watch your mind and watch what it does. If you are honest with yourself and able to do this kind of thing, you will see that every experience you have upon meeting this person, or even an object, it doesn't have to be a person, will be one of reaction. Always. And the perception will be dualistic, and it will be relative to you. You can watch yourself do that. What proceeds after that, then? After that reaction phase, from dualistic perception is reaction, and then after reaction comes exaggeration. Because after that, after one reacts to cold, then one exaggerates that and learns something about themselves. And the reason why that is automatic and habitual is that once you have a self-nature, you have to keep defining it, or the continuum doesn't continue. Because self-nature in itself is a puffball, you see. It continues as we continue it. So I learned something about myself because I like this cold. I assume I like cold. Now, of course, that's very simple, but let's say I do that with you. Let's say you walk in the room and I say to myself, I don't really like what you're wearing. It looks kind of funny to me. Funny robes. I don't like that shade of yellow. I don't like that shade of red. Let's say I do that, but of course I'm very nice about it, you see, because I was properly brought up, and I never say these things out loud. And sometimes I try to keep myself from thinking these things. I go, I don't like this. No, I shouldn't think of that. And I smile stunningly at myself, do I? And from that, I assume that I have been extremely successful in what I am doing. But actually what has happened is the moment that I've had a reaction to you or your robes or your clothing, I now have karma with that. To perceive as humans perceive doesn't automatically create karma. To exaggerate, to react, and then to exaggerate that which has within it the makings of hatred, greed, and ignorance. I either want your clothes or I reject them. That creates karma. That is the cause and effect relationship that we see that ultimately results in the suffering that we experience. And that really is the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha teaches us that we experience what we experience due to a cause, and that cause is dualistic perception resulting in reaction, which results in exaggeration. And if you can follow some of this through, you will see that exaggeration only exaggerates itself more. Without taking oneself in hand and practicing pure view, without engaging in meditation, without applying the antidote through engaging in meritorious activity, exaggeration only continues itself. Because now, if I like your clothing, I either want it or I don't want it. So I like your clothing, therefore I like it, I want it. There's an attraction there. And if I have an attraction there, then I learn something about myself from that. If I learn something about myself from that, I continue with that knowledge about myself and I do something else. You see, and it just continues and it snowballs, and has done so since time out of mind. And the Buddha teaches us, therefore, to apply the antidote. That one should apply the antidote of generosity, compassion, selfless activity, pure view, meditation, offerings, visualization, mantra, depending on what particular element of the Buddha's teaching you are practicing, or what particular vehicle of the Buddha's teaching you are accomplishing. There are different avenues, but they are all antidotes that lead to supreme realization. We unfortunately have a peculiar kind of delusion. Since all of this has occurred, since time out of mind, since this has been happening, since when we can't remember, of course we have no awareness of when that is, we have come to the point where our perceptions are so exaggerated. And the artificial construction of self-nature is so completely exaggerated that we are almost drunk. We experience a kind of drunkenness, not understanding how things happen. We do not understand what is happening to us and why. And sentient beings are suffering because of that, I think, more than anything. They do not understand why they are suffering. Don't you think that's true of us also? Don't you think that we still look at our lives and we say, oh, I'm hurting because I have arthritis. You know? Or, I'm hurting because my mother was not nice to me. Or, I'm lonely because my sweetheart left me. Or, I'm hungry because I have no food. Or, I'm sick, or I'm poor, or I'm whatever it is that I think I am, because of this reason. And we actually get to the point where we say, you are doing this to me. You are. And in fact, because of that, we can't fix it. We try, we spend, how many years? What's the lifespan? What's the popular lifespan these days? 75 years? We spend 75 years trying to fix something out there. And we never get it fixed. And the reason why is because the cause is not there. We are deluded thinking that my suffering comes from you, that you can or have made me suffer, or from my mother, or from my father, or from my lack of food, or from my arthritis. Even that I've externalized and blamed. But according to the Buddhist teaching, everything that we experience, including something that appears in a very real way to come from our external environment, some sickness that we caught, it was contagious, you gave it to me. You know, some car that hit me, it was out there, and not only that, it was driven by somebody else. Or something that my mother or father did to me, and because of that I am scarred forever. Or some food that I ate that gave me an allergic reaction. These things we continue to try to fix out there. We stop eating food that we're allergic to, or we react in this way. We do all these different things. Blame our mother and father. Try to fix what happened with them. And actually, according to the Buddhist teaching, all such activities that occur in the realm of relativity arise from a cause. And the Buddha teaches us what that cause is. The Buddha teaches us that all phenomena that we experience, including something that appears very externalized and seems to cause us to suffer, that actually is a reflection or a manifestation or an emanation of the content of our own mind streams, and nothing other than that. That it literally cannot be fixed by trying to fix it out there. The more we try to manipulate our environment, the deeper we are into it. And children, we can get into it deep. The more we try to manipulate our relationships, the more we create the karma of loneliness. The more we try to get fed, have for ourselves, the more that we try to do that, the more that we increase the actual non-virtuous activity, the actual meat that brings about ultimate suffering, and specifically in that case, the ultimate suffering of not having. So that while we cannot understand it, the antidote to lack and poverty is generosity, is giving. The antidote to loneliness is kindness and loving beyond the point that it's easy for you to do. Extraordinary effort, that kind of thing. The antidote to frightening things happening to you that hurt you in some way or frighten you, is to create within your mind pure view through your meditation and practice. But we don't think that. When we're afraid, we hide. When we're hungry, we eat. When we're poor, we try to work harder. We don't understand the Buddha's teaching. And we still are like that. Even though we repeat this mantra, even though we hold the Buddha as our supreme object of refuge, we still act like we used to act. So to sum up, it doesn't matter if we learn to accomplish puja so beautifully that it becomes like an art form. It doesn't matter if we learn to practice in such a way that we become expert. It doesn't matter if we learn all the fine tunings of our faith. Or even as a meditator who is not a Buddhist. It doesn't matter if we act compassionate, or if we act holy, or if we act reverent in some way, or if we act as though we know so much. If we don't understand these most basic of teachings, these philosophies, if we do not understand as the Buddha taught and understood, the true knowledge, the true understanding of the realm of relativity, if we do not understand the antidote, no matter what we look like, we are still wandering in confusion. And really, ultimately, if we do not accept for ourselves the supreme object of refuge, which is enlightenment itself. And that's true, whether you call yourself a Buddhist or whether you do not. You should take as your supreme object of refuge the precious awakened state, and study and practice in such a way that you achieve that state. And nothing should be your object of refuge that is less than that. Not healing, not looking a certain way, not living a certain kind of life. Supreme enlightenment must be the goal. It must be your supreme object of refuge. The true primordial wisdom state, the awakening to one's own pristine nature. Because, as the Buddha taught, that is the cessation of suffering. It is the cessation of all dharmas, the cessation of all cause and effect relationships. It is the state beyond sorrow. I think it is possible, certainly as Buddhists, we must practice in such a way that we understand that teaching. But I think even as non-Buddhists, it is possible to think in that way, to begin to understand the meaning of that, and to practice accordingly. I think that to understand the philosophy of an enlightened one is a precious and valuable thing. And these are some of the teachings about that philosophy. So, thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you so very much for being here today, and welcome always. These teachings by Jetsunma have been given over the years and are archived here at KPC and offered to you uh, uh, with joy, basically, because they are just so timeless and helpful. At least that's how I found them. So, not meaning to preach at all, but in any case, we're glad to share them with you. The time has changed. It's now 11 a.m. On Sundays at Eastern Time in the United States. So we're changing kind of because the seasons are changing here and the activities are changing their time a bit. And so this works out to be a better place. So 11 a.m. on Sundays, come often. KPC here in Maryland is open outside dawn to dusk every day. It's open every day. And inside prayer room is open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So everyone's welcome. Come, relax, pray, meditate. Join us in whatever we're doing or do your own thing, whatever makes you happy and whatever brings you peace. So we really do offer you to come and, see the animals and see Jetsunma's compassionate outreach, which is extraordinary. Buddhist Relief is pretty impressive. KPC Buddhist Relief Group. Every week they donate tons, literally tons of food to various places nearby. We have a number of partners now in the area, and each of them is busy, taking the food and either offering it on shelves or offering it as made-up meals or whatever it is that their particular community needs and they're serving. So it's pretty amazing, and we're happy to be part of it. Let's see, you can come out here anytime. The land, we have 65 acres of walking trails, meditation gardens, and lots of farm animals that are helping us raise some of this. Not all the food. We actually we go out and buy a lot of it, but and so donations are really important, of course. But also, we offer online, in addition to these teachings by Jetsunma, we offer teachings by Khenpo Tenzin Norgay. I'm sorry, Tenzin Karzai. It goes by Khenpo Karzai here, and he teaches on Wednesday evenings, the first and third and fourth Wednesdays at 7:30. And to learn more about him, you can go to our website, tara.org. And just, put in the search Karzai and you'll find his page. Come join us for any of those. They are offered online on Zoom. And in addition, we have meditations on Saturdays and Sundays, both in person and on YouTube. And those are offered on YouTube. We have Medicine Buddha, which is offered on Facebook every evening at 5:30 p.m. That's a change from it used to be 7. And also we offer Soak food offering ceremony that brings tremendous merit because of all the offering aspects to it and all the prayers. And that's every day, and it's at different times every day. So go to tara.org, T-A-R-A. If you're on a phone especially, just go to the bottom of the homepage and you'll see a link down at the bottom that will say webcasts, and under that it'll say, and calendar. Click on that link and it'll take you to the page that's got the calendar, which is right below where we show whatever we're showing here online, we show on the website. So that's what we do. What can I say? Anything else? If you are interested in making an offering to Jetsunma, having received teachings and to strengthen that connection, you can anytime. Her PayPal account is jetsumagift@gmail.com. So come join us. 3 days a week. We also have drum circles, drumming for rain, so that we can keep the planet going and keep the all of our friendly trees and plants and animals outside there happy. So they do that here at the temple. At the moment, I think it's Sundays at 11:30 in the morning, Mondays at 6 p.m. and Tuesdays at 6. I'm sorry, Mondays at 6:30 and Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Come drum for rain too. There's a lot to do here, but please feel free to come and explore your spiritual nature. Have a wonderful, wonderful week and take care.